Today in the Oldwolf Workshop, half lap joint.
Hello. It's a crisp, cool, late October morning here in Wisconsin. I'm Derek Olson with the Oldwolf Workshop Studio. Kind of starting to show a new feature on the blog this month called How Did I Do It Friday, where on the last Friday of the month, me and several other bloggers and podcasters are going to be choosing a joint. And we're going to be taking it into our shop and showing how we create that specific one joint that month. This month we're starting out with half lap joints. So this is How I Do It Friday, half lap joints, Oldwolf Workshop style. So starting out here, I've got a little bit of 1x6 pine, white pine that I'm going to work with here. And what I want to do is I want to mark out my two pieces of stock that I'm going to take this half lap joint from. I've got my marking gauge set to 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to run that along and make these marks here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to take and set my marking gauge to make my marks for the cheek cut. So I set it to the width of the one. I use that to mark the other board. That's where my cheek cut's going to come in. And I double check the width because there could be some slight variance, and I want to get them measured just right. I don't want to just assume that that they're both exactly the same. I actually set my marking gauge here to a little bit less than 3/8 inch, just by a hair less. That'll give me a little bit of wiggle room when when I'm sawing. And again, as long as I get my two joints marked up and they line up right, it doesn't matter if I'm off by 1/1000th of an inch at all, one way or the other. Making sure I stay along the face. Now I'm only going to mark one shoulder at this time. Even though I have the marking gauge set and I've marked two things at a time every time so far, I'm just marking one because I want to use what I end up with here after I saw to help me mark the other ones so that they line up right together. I'm not just going to trust that my cuts are going to be perfect here and I can transfer that perfection over to the other one. I'm going to cut this one, use this one to fit the other one. That way I get a good joint. Now that I have my one side for this joint marked out, I've gone ahead and I've made it a second-class saw cut. How close I'm getting in here. And what I did is I just took a chisel and I made a little quick notch to help me start my saw right in that groove there. That's a Robert Wearing second-class saw cut is what that is. And I go ahead and this is actually kind of the setup I like to use when I'm sawing these tenons like this, is I like to brace it up on the side, clamp it in a wood clamp like this, and saw, and make my sawing as I'm facing my bench kind of in line with it. If I put it in my wood vise here, I'm kind of in here along the bench. Yeah, it works. For me, stepping back and having this little space where I can get into it here, this works just fine. Of course, I have to be careful as I'm sawing because I do have the holdfast back here, and I don't want to bump into that holdfast with my saw. That's not good on the saw. But to start a little bit of easy cutting with my tenon saw here, making sure I'm cutting in that line that I marked, but trying to make sure that I'm keeping it on the waist side. This is my waist side. Using my saw to brace it, keeping my cut vertical. And I'm just going to do that by just taking my chisel, knocking it in. I'm going to give myself something to brace against here. And then I draw the chisel in a little bit, going careful and slowly. And I pop out a nice little pop out that nice little groove. And what happens is when I use the saw blade will ride right in that nice little groove and draw straight down and help me keep that saw cut square and straight. So what I want to do now, I've got half my joint done. I'm going to take my same marking gauge, and what I'm going to do in order to help make myself match one side to the other is I'm going to set my marking gauge for the depth of this cut with the thickness of the half lap that I have left on the side that I've already finished. With this side of the joint all marked out, it's the same procedure to saw out the joint. Sawing my shoulder first, then doing my cheek cut. Remaining using a second-class saw cut on my shoulder and a first-class saw cut on the cheek. But what I'm looking for as I'm holding them is I want to make sure that I have close to the right thickness here. I can plane it up nice and smooth once the joint's all dry and finished. I want to make sure that my mating between the two surfaces here is pretty flat and smooth. When I cut these things, I try and err on the side of a little bit too thick, so that the two joints might sit a little bit proud like this, because it's much easier to just go ahead and refine the flatness of my shoulder a little bit by using just a little bit of cleanup with a chisel than it is to try and, of course, make up some thickness later on if I was off by a whole bunch. If I was off by a whole bunch, I might just go ahead and remake the piece and remake the joint. What I like about half-lap joints is when they're appropriate, they're a great joint. They're quick and easy joinery to cut, and it's fairly a simple joint. In my opinion, the fault of them is that they are kind of a weaker joint, and you want to deal with when you're dealing with twisting strength. Mostly the strength they're relying on is the glue surface that you're getting along the shoulder and along the cheek. I used a half-lap joint, and I believe that's what Chris Schwartz uses when he made this, his version of this English layout square. This is, of course, my knockoff of that version. And when I made the half-lap joints, I just couldn't leave well enough alone. I go ahead and, when I use them in framing or something like that, I like to go ahead and add some little through dowels to give it a little bit of extra glue surface, a little bit of cross-grain strength to that joint. I suppose something else you could do if you were using this joint in a space that wasn't as obvious or wasn't as apparent in a piece of furniture, is maybe what you could do is drive some nails and clench those nails through in the back. Then you'd have a nice solid joint with the half-lap too. Other than that, for me, I just am not capable of leaving well enough alone. I have to go ahead and reinforce it with a little bit of doweling. And I like to use contrasting dowels. So what I have here is a little bit of walnut. We're going to cut it up. We're going to arrive a couple of dowels with it using a doweling plate. And we're going to use them, drill some holes and use them to shore up our half-lap joint in that time. What I'm going to start doing now is I'm actually going to split some of the wood from the dowel, or from the little blanks that I cut up. When I'm doing this, I use a chisel and just a light little tap with a mallet. What I do when I do that is I get splits that go along the grains of the wood, which adds strength to what I'm working on. You can see one of the first pieces that I broke apart here. Let me see if I can figure out how it went back together. Same size piece, working along with the grain of the wood. It's split like this. When I splits like that, I keep the same running strength of the wood inside that dowel, you get far superior dowels, riving them apart like this, and then driving them through a doweling plate. This is my doweling plate, a homemade doweling plate. As I drive them through this doweling plate and get them down to the size that I want, I get a far superior dowel to what I could even begin to dream about buying in a home center. Had a little bit of time now, a little bit for the glue to set up in the joint here, so we should be all good. And yeah, that is a pretty solid, decent joint. Again, what I want to work on is I want to add these cross dowels through there, just to give it a little bit more strength against a twisting torsion type move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to mark out where I want these to go. I'm thinking I got 3 dowels. I'm going to make a triangle out of them. I have one in each of the points and one out on the end. More of a stylistic choice, really. I imagine you could do 2. You do any matter of what things you believe will look good and look right. So I'm going to start out here. My 45 degree. I'm just going to set it up. This just kind of help me make sure I keep these things in a pretty straight line. You see, I kind of made a little mark there like this. I'm not sure how well that shows up on the video, but I got a cross line going from the top down. From there, I'm just going to take an awl and I'm going to set where I want these to be. So, holes are drilled all the way through. Pins are rived. All I have to do is put a little bit of glue in and drive the pins in place. Drive the pins. Pins driven all the way through, and I just take my flush cut saw. Come in close if you want. I just saw them off. After that, a little cleanup work with the block plane, and I'll have a finished joint. So, a little bit of planing, a little bit of sanding, half lap joints all done. Thanks for watching me on How Would I Do It Friday, and please make sure you drop down to the bottom of the screen underneath the video and check out some of the other bloggers and podcasters and see how they do it in this joinery smorgasbord that we're starting last Friday of every month. Once again, from the Oldwolf Workshop Studio, my name is Derek Olson, and just remember to keep your balance between your reason and your passion. Thanks for watching.